and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk, now in its 17th year, one of the city's longest-running TV talk shows. Please join the dialogue tonight. You can call in at 718-960-7241. You can also email comments to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Well, Bronxites have benefited from BronxNet television in a number of ways. Certainly, I'd be the first to tout the advantages of having this program, a weekly talk show that provides thought-provoking discussion as well as a way for Bronxites to have their say on issues of importance. But there are numerous other shows of great value on Channel 67 and Verizon Fios 33, and also on 3 of the 4 BronxNet channels. Bronxites can present their own programs. There's also training, so Bronxites can learn to produce TV programs, not to mention a thriving internship program. In fact, many of our crew members working in the studio tonight are student interns. Having said all that, unfortunately, the future of BronxNet is being debated out there in the world, and tonight that's our subject, the future of public access in the Bronx. Around the table tonight we have 3 Bronx enthusiasts. One is my boss, Executive Director of BronxNet, Michael Maxnabi. Nice to have you with us.
It's a great day.
And it's always great to have back on the program a former borough president of the Bronx and also the chairman and a partner in Mercury LLC, the Honorable Fernando Ferrer. Always a pleasure to have you with us.
Good to be here, Gary.
Thank you so much. Mr. Nabi, let's start with you. I've mentioned among the things that you're real thrilled about having BronxNet.
I think he looks cool.
What's going on out there that
What's going on?
we need to have a show like this?
Well, BronxNet is the public access media center serving Bronxites, a borough of 1.4 to 1.5 million people, with production training and ultra-local programming connecting all of us. Every decade or so, the cable company has to give something back to the community in terms of a community benefits agreement that covers 10 years or 12 years or so that Bronxites in this case, we, our neighbors, you, can have a voice to share your ideas, to engage in community building through media, to share your ideas through media and have media access. It's public interest obligations in a borough that the cable company has done well in.
So, I mean, in essence, there's a contract that's up. I want to be very clear so viewers can know there's a contract that's up or is about to be up that's being renegotiated. And is there a question about the future of BronxNet television?
The cable company, in this case Cablevision, is using the public rights of way to run cable and fiber to conduct their business. So they give something back to the community.
They don't give it back, by the way. They are required to support community access in cable television. They're not given anything.
And it's been over 2 years.
Bronxites who are paying the fare understand that. Right.
So BronxNet, really, Bronxites have been harmed because it's been over 2 years where we've been waiting for a renewal that meets 21st century
So the contract
public access
actually
needs.
expired?
The contract has been expired for over 2 years.
What's the problem here? Why can't, and Michael has been somewhat vague in saying the cable company, we're talking about Cablevision, right?
Yeah.
Why is there an issue? We know what the benefits are, we know the quality of the programs, we know what BronxNet gives to the community. Why is it just kind of not assumed that we're just going to continue what we do?
This is an issue because Cablevision can't help themselves. This is the way they always have been. Sitting across the table from you is the guy who negotiated the first 2 contracts, agreements with them. And I can tell you the first conversation I had with Chuck Dolan, the CEO of Cablevision. right across my conference table when I was borough president, just beginning as borough president. Mario Marola, the late Mario Marola, district attorney, got me on the steps of Borough Hall and said, hey, look, Cablevision owes the people of the Bronx over $1 million. What are you talking about, Mario? I said, yeah, they're supposed to have an agreement. The old cable community access organization, they had their assets seized. It was part of an ongoing citywide investigation into corruption. Clean that up, put the district attorney on the cable board, the public access board that became BronxNet, negotiated with Cablevision and told them, look, we've got to start getting this up and running. And they said, we're not only going to not give you any money, but we're not interested in this.
And one of the reasons they wouldn't be interested in it is because they basically have to, quote unquote, and I'll use the word that Michael used, give away 4 channels or designate 4 channels to, quote unquote, public access. Is there a federal requirement or some other statute that insists that they do so, or are we simply in a case of saying, hey, please be nice and do this for the Bronx?
Gary, this ain't charity. This is the entire city's agreement for the right of a franchise in New York. So Cablevision has a franchise in this borough. It could dig the streets, run wire on top of poles, connect to people's homes, and for that they pay the city of New York a fee, and they give the city of New York channels in return. They give the Bronx 4 channels. It's not a gift. It's the requirement that they have in order to obtain a very lucrative franchise. So lucrative that in the last 10 years, it has given them $2.3 billion in gross revenue. In fact, Cablevision has done very well in the Bronx. They just haven't done so well by the Bronx.
We're going to get back to Mr. Nobby to really talk about some of the things that BronxNet has given to the borough of the Bronx. Is there any leverage? I mean, the way you've couched it, it certainly seems like, goodness gracious, how could Cablevision do anything but renew a contract or expand the agreement with BronxNet, but they seem to be holding fast, and now we're 2 years running without a deal. What's the trade-off? What's the sticking point, and where are we at as far as a negotiation?
Gary, while they have more than doubled their revenue in this borough over the last 7 years, they want to hold the support of community access to exactly the same levels that have existed for the last 12 years. So they don't want to come up with any modernization of facilities. They don't want to add new facilities to add access to community producers, to expand community content on Cablevision. They want to keep everything as it is, and they'd like to see BronxNet wither away.
And at this point, when you say that, I get chills. Because that's certainly not the vision that I have had for what we do here and for the borough.
And not the one that I had when we created BronxNet.
Can you quantify, Michael, in some form, the effect that BronxNet has had on the borough of the Bronx? And in this, I guess since 1994, what is the legacy, or 93?
93.
That's right. I always think of BronxTalk when that started in 94. What is the legacy of BronxNet, and what is the value to the Bronx and even to Cablevision to have these channels?
Well, BronxNet is a not-for-profit 501c3 that has trained thousands of Bronxites in the Bronx. In
Literally
production.
thousands.
Thousands. These are our neighbors that take training in studio production and field production courses that we offer, as well as other training workshops, and are producing programs. They are sharing programs that reflect the diversity of one of the most diverse places in the world, our borough of the Bronx. So next door in the studio at 8 p.m. on Channel 69, Honduras, New York, produced a live show in not only Spanish and English, but they speak the Garifuna language, that African roots-based language, and they talk ultra-local issues that connect us globally.
I have to interject because I see them every single night when I come in, and I always stop to look. The production is first-rate. They are on the phone with literally people all over the world. Where else are we getting this kind of programming, not only in the Bronx, but anywhere?
Jose Francisco Avila, the president of the Garifuna Coalition, says BronxNet is the only outlet for the Garifuna voice. And as a matter of fact, there's over 5 Garifuna programs here and this is a significantly growing and emerging community in the Bronx. Albanian culture in the Bronx, West Indian programs, African programs. We have Face to Face Africa. These are producers that just took both workshops because they believe in community building through media. They believe in this valuable resource, and they don't have another way to share what they really feel is important information for these great communities here.
How different is BronxNet from what the other 4 boroughs deliver?
Well, it's very different in some ways that I think we can appreciate. So, for example, this terrific program, BronxTalk,
there you go,
is part of BronxNet's professional commitment to produce programs by, for, and about the Bronx with Bronxites, about Bronx issues, with professionals and students that are part of our training program for future media professionals. So we have programs like the Emmy Award-winning Bronx Live, Open, Dialogo Abierto, BronxTalk, and as well.
Let me stress that. These programs win awards. You'd be very proud of that. And they're Bronx programs.
Can you, just back to kind of something that I suggested, can you quantify, especially as somebody who's been the borough president, the effect that these kinds of programs have on a culture, on an urban people?
I can tell you, to get these programs, this studio at Lehman College up and running, as you know, was daunting. Without much support, pulling teeth. It was real dentistry with Cablevision, and it still is. Too bad after the passage of all these years. But when you get people involved, you get students involved, a great institution like Lehman College involved, and you're a partner in all of this, wonderful things happen. You get great talent, and great talent has passed through this institution and graced major media, as you know. A young woman named Darlene Rodriguez, she was then Pomales, was a beginning Bronx 67.
Those of us, Michael and I, know that very well. You can add Dean Meminger at New York
Dean
Times
Meminger,
list.
that's
And
right.
the list certainly goes on, and it's not only people in front of the camera. We know people who are
Right.
editors for the network.
And that's
Leslie
the
Peggett.
real
Leslie
benefit.
Peggett at
Leslie, of
CBS.
course.
Started in high school with us.
Michael and I have so many friends who've passed through over the years.
It's the real benefit. People really do learn the craft, get information. They depend on BronxNet.
It's workforce development training as well as media access and democracy in a digital age. It's important. It's in tandem.
Let's bring on Mark from Pelham Parkway, who calls in all the time and makes use of these airwaves all the time, and a big proponent of democracy and media, I assume. Hi, Mark. Nice to have you with us.
Hey, Gary, Michael, Max, Your Honor, for that.
Hi.
Good day, great day.
I'm just going to make a statement, then I have a question. Cablevision has been racking the Bronxites over the coals for the last 7-8 years, ever since they deregulated cable. Every year my bill goes up $5, $10.
Have you noticed how your bill is going up?
Yes, I do notice. And the
Amazing.
thing is,
While
the
they're
quality,
pleading poverty.
the quality keeps getting worse and worse. They used to advertise, don't go to satellite because the picture breaks up. I cannot tell you how many times I've been on the phone with Cablevision when I'm watching a show, and the thing just blacks out. They send their bullet through, and it's ruined one of my recorders and everything else. So that's a separate issue. I think the issue lies with the Dolans and what they get away with. If you look at Madison Square Garden, they're still getting a $15 million tax break every year that goes back to the 70s when the Garden wasn't profitable, and they're still getting away with it. That's why
Mark,
they didn't
ask
want to
your
move.
question. We got
So
it.
my
Go ahead.
question is, if they have a franchise agreement with the city of New York and they're not living up to their franchise agreement, how come we're not dragging them in court and making it? And the other thing is Fios is coming, and now we're going to have some competition. And I think that's going to be the best thing. Where you have no competition, they can afford to do this to the public. And I think they should be held accountable.
And that's what's got Cablevision absolutely freaked out, the idea of competition. Mark raised a very interesting point. The last 7 years, while they try to hold BronxNet down and their outlays for community access down, they've been raising their rates. In fact,
Everyone who watches this program is aware, or just about is aware of
they've
that.
doubled their rates and their revenue in the past 7 years. So, Mark, here's what you and all your neighbors in the Bronx can do. When you pay your next bill to Cablevision, drop them a line saying, I'm sick and tired of the fact that you keep on raising my rates and BronxNet and community access gets nothing. Come to the table and start negotiating.
Michael, you and I have talked about Channel 33, and I've begun to mention it on a regular basis on the show because the program is carried on Verizon Fios. Where is that at? So now there is a competitor where there wasn't when Freddie Ferrer was negotiating the first cable contract. Is Verizon Fios a viable option for those who say, well, maybe I don't want to do Cablevision? And does that begin to give the people at BronxNet more leverage to negotiate the next contract?
Verizon Fios is offered in parts of the Bronx, and it is being deployed throughout the Bronx. It is a product that does carry BronxNet on 6 channels. We're the first public access station in the nation on 6 channels on Verizon Fios, channel 33 through 38.
And you program on all 6.
We do.
I was going to say, there's 2 more channels, BronxNet, and these are additional programs and additional things that you might not get on Cablevision?
Well, for example, the Bronx, you have a channel by, for, and about young people. Students are producing programs in their schools, at their youth organizations, as well as in the studios of BronxNet on the beautiful campus of Lehman College after school. And other opportunities.
That is
producing.
I know Freddie Ferrer well enough to know that was one of his ideas and dreams when he helped found BronxNet. Go
In
ahead.
fact, the first home of BronxNet was in a public high school.
In Truman High School, we all
Right.
know that. So that's one of the things you can get.
So, for example, today at 4:30, there were about 5 different high schools represented right here, students producing, working collaboratively as a team to produce programs for this channel. That is theirs, that is yours. And we have trained over 2,900 students, over 2,900 intermediate school, college, and high school students in media production. And
Is it a matter now of saying on some level, you know what, Cablevision, go ahead, drag your feet, and then you allow Verizon Fios, which is not in every neighborhood in the Bronx, to ultimately get their service available? Is that a viable negotiation?
No, it
point?
isn't. I'm sorry, Gary. I mean,
I'm trying.
It may sound good, but all it does is lets Cablevision continue to underfund BronxNet, to ignore the needs of the Bronx community and the needs of public access. It allows them, for example, to let the studio not be modernized. It allows them to ignore the needs to go into HD. It allows them to continue to ignore the fact that we need to expand physical access to BronxNet, have another satellite studio in the South Bronx and the East Bronx to give more Bronxites the opportunity to fully participate.
You know, I've used this statistic so often, and I know you've thought about it. We've all thought, the 3 of us have thought about it. The borough, and you mentioned 1.4 to 1.5 million people. If it were its own city, we would be as large as San Francisco, and therefore we would have daily media and our own cable channels, et cetera, et cetera. The thought that these 4 channels serving the entire borough, when you compare it to other cities, makes no sense. We're twice the size of Boston, for example. So I've got in front of me, and we're going to show it a little closer up on the screen, but I've got a whole proposal for expanding BronxNet to have a facility in the South Bronx. The floor is yours, Mr. Executive Director. We're going to put it up on the screen. What are the possibilities here?
a community needs assessment was conducted in 2007, and Bronxites have called for a upgraded facility on the campus of Lehman College for studio training, for access for post-production, right here, upgraded facilities, as well as in this great borough of 1.4 to 1.5 million people, this great city of 1.4 million people.
The city of
and
the
counting.
Bronx, I see, okay.
A South Bronx location and an East Bronx location connected to our network operations on the beautiful campus of Lehman in the Northwest Bronx.
And maybe the value is obvious, but why don't you state what the value of that would be?
This is, we are right now at capacity. There is increasing demand for our training service, for usage for the field equipment and studios, and this would be to allow us to train Bronxites in those areas, as well as to increase capacity to meet demand.
Freddie Ferrer, by asking for funding for this kind of a thing, I know in your mind you think it's just, but are you then overstepping your negotiation? You're having a hard enough time getting the basics covered. Now you're saying expand what you do. Is that making the negotiation more difficult?
who's got a tough enough time expanding or meeting their basic needs? It's certainly not Cablevision. They're doing very well indeed, thank you very much. They keep on raising rates, they keep on ruining the Knicks and the Rangers, and they're doing nothing for BronxNet. And I think it's wrong.
So you think the funding is there, and
the revenue is certainly there.
There's no question about it. What is the status of negotiations? Is it ongoing? Is it a matter of you calling and they hang up the phone? What's at play right here?
Cablevision is saying today what they have said the last 2 times out. We will give you nothing. In fact, Chuck Dolan says not only will we give you not a nickel, but we want 2 of the 4 stations back.
How do you negotiate that? I guess goes back to my question earlier about is there leverage other than just saying examine the need, but they don't seem to really care about the need.
The best way to negotiate is with people power. The first meeting I had with Chuck Dolan, he threatened me. If you keep on talking about money to build a studio and money to start this work at BronxNet, I'm going to tell people in the Bronx that you're solely responsible for their not being wired.
So this is when you were borough president, he was playing the political power game.
My first meeting. Well, I was a young guy. I guess I wasn't as wise and gray as I am today. I leaned across the table. I told him, well, then I will let Bronxites know what hand you had in the original corruption around Cablevision. I said, thank you very much. It's been a good meeting. See you around. We negotiated, and we started BronxNet. But that's the way they always start.
So if Freddie Ferrer is right, the idea is people power, which is something that I know he leveraged in many ways over his tenure as borough president. You have been very proud of the hearing that was held at Borough Hall. I spoke at that hearing, and many of our friends and neighbors. Let's talk a little bit about what has happened and what's the kind of thing you'd like to see happen and what opportunities there are to make it easy for Bronxites to have their say.
On a cold, snowy November 9th, 2009.
I remember.
At a cable hearing at Borough Hall at the Bronx County Courthouse, hundreds of Bronxites came out and supported in favor of BronxNet and enhanced studio resources for Bronxites. This is about the Bronx. This is about building a better Bronx. This is about a growing Bronx. We've had a lot of positive transformation and a lot of great things happen. And we've seen that across our great borough, and we've seen that here, and we've talked about those positive outcomes here. At that hearing, that was one of the places we heard so many eloquent voices, whether it be the students, the independent producers, the public access participants that are involved at many different levels.
And you told me that this was one of the largest hearings of its kind and actually dwarfed some other well-publicized hearings. This was really an outpouring of support.
Our great borough president, Ruben Diaz Jr., listened to Bronxites for over 3.5 hours and asked questions. He was involved. He was invested. He heard loud and clear that there is tremendous support at this cable hearing for public access, for independent voices, for democracy in a digital age, and for diversity.
Bronxites who hear what you're saying and are saying, you know what, I like BronxTalk. I'd like to think that they do. I like all the other programs. I also like the opportunity that BronxNet provides. How can they right now easily make their vote heard or their voices heard?
One way is to let your elected officials know that BronxNet is important as a media resource that benefits the Bronx.
Sign the petition online.
That's what I'm waiting to hear.
www.bronxnet.org. At our website, and let us know what you think of our website, but really go to bronxnet.org, bronxnet.org, and you'll see an icon at the top, this color perhaps, a banner that says support public access. Click on that icon. It's simply a matter of entering your zip code and filling out a couple of fields, maybe 1.5 minutes it takes at tops, and you'll send a message to all of your elected officials at a borough-wide, city, and state level.
You know, I did do that, and I have to say, and I filled out who knows how many petitions over the years. I got a call from Elliot Engel's office who said, "Hey Gary, we saw that you sent us an email, because so it went through. It's not one of those that just goes out into the air. It actually goes to people." Mr. Ferrer, we're going to give you the final word here. Number one, what can elected officials do, and your colleagues or former colleagues in government, what can they do? And then, of course, let's just ask you to kind of give us a direction and what can we expect in the future. So let's start with elected officials. Can they have influence here?
Having been one, I know they can, and I know they will. They advocate for the people of the Bronx. That's their job, but also what they believe in. So I'm sure they'll do that. But I think the most important force here is people. Viewers, people who believe in BronxNet, people who believe in the idea that BronxNet is opening access to the community, developing skills in the community, putting the best of the Bronx on the screen on 4 and 6 channels in Fios, making this dream available to even more people throughout the Bronx, seeing the quality of our programs not only aired in the Bronx, but in fact aired around the city. We have some real stars here at BronxNet, and people are waking up and noticing them.
And do you think this is going to work in the long run? Do you have a quick prediction?
I sure do. I have a tremendous faith in the ability of people to move events. If enough viewers, if enough people sign that petition, let people know that they're concerned, leaders will follow.
Freddie Ferrer, always a pleasure to have you. Thank you for championing not only BronxNet, but of course continuing to championing a borough of the Bronx.
A labor of love.
And Michael Navi, we'll see you around the block. You're going to tell us to stay Bronx strong?
Stay Bronx strong. Proud to call you both neighbors and proud to be with you here today, all of you as well.
Folks, don't forget to sign that online petition at bronxnet.org. And if you have further comments or questions, that's where you go, BronxNet, on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, and email them to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com. We'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. More proof of what we're doing. We've got great things coming up. Of course, archives of our show are available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar. And what's upcoming? Next Monday, another Bronx enthusiast will join us. Councilman Jimmy Vacca will talk about the buses and subways, the closing of schools, and the new chancellor, as well as his proposal to rein in irresponsible landlords and much more. Then on the 20th, we'll do a holiday show featuring some incredible music by an incredible Bronx musician. Bronx Talk, now at its 17th year, as I mentioned earlier, one of the longest-running weekly TV talk shows in New York City on BronxNet, Cablevision Channel 67, Verizon Fios 33. Special thanks to producer Jane Folloro, director Michael Arias, and the cast of thousands up in the booth, the student interns all around us, and to you, good night.
There's a principle in economics called the multiplier theory, and it talks about how many of the dollars that are initially spent by BronxNet, that is how much of the budget of BronxNet, goes out into the community and gets respent and impacts the community as a whole. That number at BronxNet is about 3 times the budget of BronxNet. There's also a more important plus factor in terms of economic development. And many of the shows that exist in BronxNet about health, about culture, about jobs, discussions about new retail clusters, they cause residents of the Bronx to go to those organizations. They cause residents of the Bronx to spend money at those organizations. They cause people in the Bronx to be employed by those organizations. In addition to that, BronxNet trains a tremendous amount of people, 17,000 interns over the last 10 years or so, another 4,000 people in its training program over the last 6 years, dozens of former BronxNet interns at ABC, CBS, NBC, and other organizations like that.
Voice your support to keep the channels open and strong. Online, visit bronxnet.org and click on Support Public Access Television and sign the letter to your local representatives.